Hey, team players, today we're going to be discussing the Houston Texans. And obviously, we're in the middle of a deep rebound. And what the question of this rebuild is that have we finally hit a year from being away? Or are we still a year from a year of being away? And that is the real question. And I have, of the entire division, the entire conference maybe, if I have to put a chip on the table of who is going to get the first pick in the draft, it's these guys to get it. There's no doubt in my mind about this, Bob. And the first and foremost is they went all in on the wrong player, drafting a quarterback from Ohio State who, again, no Ohio State quarterback has ever been successful in the NFL. But, Joe, you can't base them upon the ones of the past. All right. He doesn't throw the ball when he's at Ohio State unless the guy is considerably open, above college open, mind you. Will Levis puts this guy to shame with this. And he actually doesn't have that accurate of a pass. What he has is amazing receivers who adjust incredibly well. What Houston would have been way better off at doing would have been taking Anderson as they did without selling their future and then using number 12 on whichever quarterback the Colts didn't feel like taking. And worst case scenario, Washington trades up and you're stuck with Will Levis as a consolation prize in the second round. That's fine. At least you have your capital for next year. And this is the other reason I have serious doubt moving into we're at least building a foundation. They signed roughly 15 free agents to one-year deals. You cannot build a culture or stability when you have that many players in flux of turnover. Because what you instinctually will have is the season starts getting a little shaky. I'm only going to play for myself. I'm not coming back from injury to play your non-making the playoffs team. I got to worry about being a free agent, getting paid next year. Why am I coming back in December to tear up again when this team's not making the playoffs? It's 100% horrendous GM and team building. And I haven't even started by talking about their players on the field yet. That's how far their GM has put them behind the 8 ball of the entire league. And that's counting the fact that the Arizona Cardinals are trying to get the 1 seed.
I'm going to stop you for a minute there.
Sorry, I can't stop when I get on this roll.
I'm going to counterpoint you for a moment.
Go for it.
Out of the players that they signed to one-year deals, I get it that you're not happy with the money that they gave to those players. But we talk about all the time giving multi-year contracts to players that you know may not fit the culture of your franchise, that may not fit, you know, on the field, which your product is putting out. The Texans for a long time, Joe, and it's hard for you to complain about culture when for the longest time they don't have a culture.
They don't. But so you can't establish one without longevity.
My counterpoint to you is this. New GM, new head coach. They're going to try to figure out how these players work. If the players work, they'll re-sign them.
You do that up front. You just structure it as a 2-year deal where only the first year is guaranteed.
Do you want to have a multi-year deal for Denzel Pyramid?
What I'm saying is, first off, you don't think you can build a culture when you never bring them in the first place. Starting point. But what you do is you just make it a very simple contract. 2-year deal. We only guarantee part of the first year. And then if we don't want you, we can cut you off with basically no penalty.
But that's essentially what they did.
No, there's no longevity. There's no, we get to bring you back on our terms. We have to now renegotiate with you to bring you back where we're fighting with the entire league.
I get your point that you're making there. And I understand where you're coming from, but I think that you need to take this from a different perspective. Is that Houston last year, they were out of some games very significantly with a very inferior quarterback in Davis Mills. And but it was surprising that they took Kansas City to the limit.
Took Philadelphia deep in the fourth quarter.
They took Philadelphia for 2 quarters. They played Jacksonville well the first time, not well the second time. They took the Giants to the limit, and the Giants were a playoff team last year as well. If you look at this roster, that one of the biggest deficiencies in this roster is the offense. The defense wasn't amazing, but they weren't as bad as the offense. So you go out there, you have Nico Collins on your team. You have, I believe, Tank Dell or something from the second round that you drafted this year. You went out and bought a washed-up Robert Woods. Mm-hmm. You have Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary because they recognized that their team wasn't as good when they couldn't run the ball. You still have Laramie Tunsil from the trade with Miami. Mm-hmm. And you at least put, whether we agree that it's the right guy or not, and you and I both agree that CJ Stroud isn't the right guy, they went out there and they found a replacement for Davis Mills because they figured out that Davis Mills isn't the answer. So there's a lot of old and young people on this team. And I think one of the things that has always perennially been one of the problems with Houston, even with Deshaun Watson, is the culture aspect of it. J.J. Watt, for the longest time, was the face of the Texans, and for very good reason, because the culture that he himself brings with him of effort and trying hard and working hard and doing well, even if we're not doing well, he's going to push that. And I don't feel that there's any player on this team that is going to do that for this team, but I do trust DeMeco Ryans. DeMeco Ryans was a great player for the Houston Texans for a long time. And he went to San Francisco. Now, granted, San Francisco was exposed in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. But he took a group of guys that, like us on the East Coast, we might not pay attention fully to what San Francisco has on their roster. But the way that they played the games that they played, they beat the teams they were supposed to beat, as we've always said, that's important. And one of the things that they did that with was with their defense. Now, DeMeco Ryans is walking into a team. I agree with you. They should have just taken Will Anderson at 1 and then if they wanted to trade back up, see what happens. But they take Will Anderson, who's an amazing product in college. You have, Kirksey and Perriman at linebackers. Perriman's, is hit or miss to me in certain respects. I have him on my fantasy team a lot. Some games he plays really well, some games he doesn't. Then you went out and you have Stingley on your team. This is just a lot of, and we talk about with the Colts is that they've just fallen off the wagon. And it's really hard to get back on the wagon if you don't have somebody that's going to right the ship.
If you don't have a wagon.
Well, yeah, you need a wagon to start with. But I think the wagon starts with Pierce. Let's be honest. Pierce is if we're looking at really on the player.
Field, it has. So we just go through their offensive line real quick. Laramie Tunsil, great asset. Left guard in Kenyon Green, first-round draft pick. Suggs this year, center, second-round draft pick. Traded for Shaq Mason, the right guard. And then Titus Howard, right tackle, first-round draft pick. There is a lot of capital put into that offensive line. Now, that's where you look at it and go, great offensive line. Let's see something happen here.
Well, that's why the running game works for them, but they have to.
That's why it has to work for them.
But they abandon it whenever they're down, and so
it's a new regime, so we can't put that label on them. But that's exactly what they did last year.
The idea of, as we've said multiple times, and we said this about the Tennessee Titans, and we've said this about a lot of teams that have good running games, is they're an asset to you. The more of a lead that you can build, and I never. I never think about Houston as being a team with a lead. And so it always feels, at least this year, because it was definitely true this year, that they were playing from behind a lot. And so when your greatest asset is not even usable for a half of the game or a quarter of the game, you're building yourself into a big problem scenario. So this is where it comes into what you said is drafting Ohio State quarterbacks has not been something that has been successful for a lot of teams. And so where this really comes in at is that quarterback situation, because this is what the quarterback room looks like in Houston. CJ Beathard, Davis Mills, and CJ Stroud. I believe CJ Beathard is on the team. Maybe I'm incorrect in saying that, but
it's Casey Keenum.
Case Keenum. Okay. So you got Case Keenum, who has done well at times when he was with the Vikings. Then you've got Davis Mills, who we know isn't it. And then you have CJ Stroud. So
you're all in on Stroud. There's no way around this.
The question is, with this team, we know the run game is solid. We know the offensive line is good enough. Now, Davis Mills was not good, and so taking a lot of sacks, getting a lot of pressure, it's hard for offensive linemen, as we've said, to play their best if the people behind them aren't playing their best.
Mm-hmm.
And so, PFF grades are really good to look at when we think about offensive linemen for both running and for passing situations. But the thing that they addressed, but they did it very poorly. I wouldn't even say it's the quarterback situation. I want to say it's the wide receiver situation.
Yes.
Because my biggest issue with this team is that since getting rid of DeAndre Hopkins, this team has, granted, I can't judge with, DeAndre and Watson being gone, but when you get rid of DeAndre Hopkins, then you get rid of Brandon Cooks. And, I can't remember if they just let them walk or if they, if it was.
Hopkins was traded for the running back who was one of the worst trades ever.
But Cooks, I can't remember if Cooks was, if they let him walk or not. But regardless of that,
mm-hmm.
you now have a worse wide receiver room than you've had even last year. Mechie, I like him, as a third. You have Nico Collins, who is good enough. You have Dell, who should be good. And then you have Robert Woods. Robert Woods is scheduled to slide in as their number one wide receiver. That has got to be the worst out of all 32 teams, the worst starting wide receiver in the league.
In terms of the team's number one, it's gonna be hard pressed to find someone who's worse than that.
Because he fell off the wagon. When we talk about wagons, Robert Woods fell off the wagon. Maybe he never really had one, but he fell off.
The argument has to be they think that Mechie's going to be healthy and fine, but that's a big ask.
If he is, though, the Texans, I think when we look at what the schedule is put ahead of them, like you've been saying, AFC South, NFC South, AFC North, then a bunch of wild card games. Well,
I don't think they can beat the NFC South, Bob.
I don't think they're built to beat Atlanta's defense.
Uh-uh.
But I think their defense is good enough to stop Atlanta. So that game could easily be 9-7, 13-6.
But I look at this like this, Bob. Any team that's competent in stopping the run, I don't see how Houston can score on them.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Like trying to just get to the point here.
I think Atlanta's defense, even though they had problems last year, I think they match up well against Houston. So that game is probably going to be low scoring because I think Houston's defense matches up pretty decently against Atlanta's offense. Same goes with Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is a mess. And I'm really unsure of what's happening there. So, you could squeak out a win there because I think the defense could be good enough, especially when coached by D'Amico Ryans, could do well. Carolina is a huge question mark. They took the better passer in the draft.
Definitely.
And so if, what's his name? What's the running back that we liked? I can't remember his name. From Carolina. And they also got Miles. I believe they got Miles Sanders in Carolina.
They got Miles Sanders in Carolina. He's their starter.
Houston's defense matches up decently well against them as well.
They're not
Carolina's
going to be able to score on these guys. Houston, I'm basically betting the under on every game.
But this is what I'm saying, though, is that they're playing teams that are also offensively challenged. And so I'm not.
I think Olave breaks his career high against this team.
I didn't mention them for a reason. So if we're looking at what can Houston do this year, they eked out 3 wins last year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not putting it out of the realm of possibility that they can get to 5 wins this year. I think 5 wins is their ceiling. I wouldn't peg them in for any more, but I definitely think they can beat Tampa. I definitely think that they can beat Atlanta. I definitely think they can beat Carolina. I definitely think that they're going to put up a shot against the Colts at one point in time. And Tennessee. I think they could split the series against Tennessee. And then they also play Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland's the only one I'm like, yeah, that's their best chance of winning.
Let's not forget about that. And so even if you take off a win against Tennessee or a win against the Colts, that's still 5 potential wins you have on the roster plus their wild card. Who are the wild ones that they play? We don't know.
So they
yet,
will
right?
play the worst team of the West, which was either Denver or Vegas. I believe it was Denver. It had to be Denver. So they'll play Denver.
Las Vegas last year, yeah.
And then they will play the worst team of the East last year, which would have been the Jets.
So they're going to lose to the Jets.
Yes.
And
probably lose to Denver too.
And they might beat Denver or the Raiders.
In fact, actually, when I need to do my Denver came lower than the Raiders at our pick. When I do my suicide pick, if they host Houston in like week 1 or 2, that's my suicide pick for Denver. I'll tell you right now.
But see, this is the thing that I'm saying, that I think that you're not. I might be overstating, but I think you're not thinking of it enough. Is the point that you made in reference to the Jaguars and in reference to the Colts is, depending on if they play these teams in the first 3 weeks of the season, I think if Houston's team is healthy,
I'm not forgetting that point. I just completely disagree with you about the status of this defense. I think that it has.
I'm not saying.
I don't think it has talent.
I'm not even saying
Jacksonville's defense has world-beating talent on it. There's a lot of first-round picks out there.
But I'm not saying playing Jacksonville at the beginning of the year. I'm saying playing teams like Tampa at the beginning of the year. Playing,
Yeah, but they're going to be just as offensively set back.
Playing the Steelers at the beginning of the year. If they play the Steelers at the beginning
of the Steelers in week 1, TJ Watt might break the sack record in 1 game.
That's what I'm saying. If they play the Steelers at the beginning of the year, that game is going to be Steelers defensive touchdowns and not offensive touchdowns.
And maybe Najee breaks 1 late.
I think that Houston's not the worst defense. They're definitely bottom tier of the league. But I think a head coach like DeMeco Ryans, who has that defensive capabilities and also coached what was on paper the best defense, I believe the first or second best defense on paper in San Francisco last year, that I think you're underselling what can happen with the defense, but I'm not overselling the fact that I think this offense is bad. But I think the defense is better than the offense because the offense is just that bad.
Yeah, I don't think that's saying much. I think you have arguably 2 of the top 5 worst units in the NFL when you look at them offense and defenses overall.
But
when it's all said and done.
But this still comes back to the point. They gave Philadelphia a game for 2 quarters and a half. They gave Kansas City a game.
They didn't finish any of them.
I get it that they didn't finish, but I'm saying you can't have I don't think these guys are going to be blown out like whenever a MAC school goes in Alabama. That's what I just don't think.
I think Arizona's going to get blown out like that.
That's what I'm trying.
I think they'll have prettier games for Texans fans to watch, but their record ain't going to be any good.
Like I said, 5 wins is the ceiling. 5 wins is the ceiling.
That's a generous ceiling.
But I think they're going to be better to watch, and you won't be as frustrated with them this year, at least defensively. But I think offensively, like you said, I think that they're going to struggle a lot, and it falls on a Dameon Pierce. It's going to fall onto CJ Stroud, and I mean, it's really going to be one of those things. I mean, they don't have any chance to be first or second in the division this year, or first or second in the conference, first or second in the division this year. They're going to be last place. The only question is in terms of the top 6 picks of the draft, what did they give up to move up this year? And what are they going to give to Arizona or whoever ended up
top 3
getting that pick? They gave up a lot, and that's going to be, we're going to look on that like you're already looking on and saying that's bad. That's bad because you're bad.
It was bad, but what was even worse was the way they did their free agency. You can't have that many players on your team that are ready to leave. And that's what they've set themselves up for.
I mean,
they want to be the
everybody's ready to leave.
Rosters.
Everybody's ready to leave Houston anyway, dude. Everybody's ready to leave Houston. So you might as well just sign everybody to a 1-year deal because you know they're leaving anyway.
It's not how you beat a culture. It's textbook wrong. Textbook wrong. And that's why next year we're going to have this exact same conversation. Ceiling of 5 wins. Guess what? 2029, ceiling of 5 wins. As long as this GM is, what the hell, this GM ain't going to get 3 years if he keeps doing this. Well, that doesn't really matter. I know it's sad. I know it's incredibly depressing, but at least you guys got the Cowboys in your state, right?
That was mean.